The story of Bernard-Henri Lévy's life is a story of care for others. Hillel asked, "If not now, when?" Wherever people suffer injustice, he is there, heart and soul, documenting so the world will not forget them. His humanitarian soul does not wait on comfort or safety. He's there. Kurdistan, Nigeria, Libya, Somalia, Bangladesh, Lesbos, and now Ukraine and Israel. Danger and despots do not stand in his path to Tikkun Olam, repairing our fractured world. Today he is with us after creating his third documentary film on the front lines of Ukraine, Glory to the Heroes. When Israel suffered the horrors of the October 7 massacre and the IDF needed to go to war, Bernard-Henri Lévy was there. His new book, Solitude d'Israël, has been received with great critical acclaim, and the English edition will be available this fall. His devotion to the whole house of Israel, whether in America or Europe, Ukraine or Eretz Yisrael, is an inspiration to all of us. Philosopher, professor at the École Normale Supérieure, humanitarian public intellectual, thought leader, author of over 45 books, filmmaker and playwright. His contributions to civilization in the best sense of the word make it a particular joy and honor to have him with us today at the Palm Beach Synagogue for the culmination of the second season of the Lévy Forum. Please welcome Bernard-Henri Lévy. If you could give a message today to Secretary of State Antony Blinken and President Biden about Israel, what would your words be now in the 7th month of the war with Hamas and having seen Iranian missiles and drones cross into Israel over the weekend, crossing the red lines? What would you say? What would be the message that you would deliver to them?
My message would be the following. I would first apologize for my broken English, but I would tell them that I was there actually on October 8, the day after October 7, that I was one of the first witnesses of what happened in the kibbutzim of the Gaza border, in Kfar Aza, in Be'eri, that I did collect some of the first testimonies of the survivors and of the witnesses, and that what happened at that moment was for the entire Israel more than a shock, more than an existential threat. It was a near-death experience for the whole state of Israel. I would say also that what happened 3 days ago was again a very unique event. 350 drones and missiles shot against Israel, aiming military targets, maybe aiming the Dimona nuclear facility, stopped, of course, by the Israeli Patriot system and by the help of America, UK, and France. This never happened in the history of any democracy in the last decades. Again, it is a unique event. And I would tell them that in that situation, it is good for Israel to know that they have the ironclad support of America. And I would tell them that every Israeli, as far as I know, and every Jew in the world and every friend of Israel is happy with that. but that an ironclad support supposes that Israel is free to react as he wishes. And that it seems to me a little paradoxical and even unfair and even uncareful and maybe irresponsible to recommend to Israel just to offer the next check. That it seems to me irresponsible to reply to this twofold near-death experience which Israel experienced by retenue, by behavior of appeasement. It's impossible. And it's impossible because I would tell them also that they know better than me that Iran is at the edge, 5 minutes to the possibility of having the possibility of charging their missiles with nuclear devices. Iran is 5 minutes away from having the same shells with nuclear material. They know, Mr. Blinken and Mr. Biden, better than me, that Iran has enriched its uranium 27 times more than what is authorized. They know that no expert of the UN World Agency has any access since months, if not years, to the Iranian facilities, and that next time the 350 missiles could really seed death in Israel, and that this has to be prevented. Israel cannot be just asked to put a helmet when Iran is authorized to shoot against them. I would try to bring all my experience of Israel, all my knowledge of situations of war, which I got in my long life, to convince them of this. We have, they have, we the Western world have to support Israel really ironclad, which means till its right to defend itself and to retaliate.
I hope they have the sense to listen to you, Mr. Lévy. We had with us John Bolton earlier in the season, who has consistently had a much more aggressive policy towards Iran, that America should have started doing reprisals for all of their proxy battles against us and against Israel. Is that a policy that you think is now the urgent one for us to take?
What I know, my first trip in Israel was in 1967, the war of the 6 days. And I think I lived by myself nearly every of the wars which were imposed to Israel throughout its history since 1967. The situation has never been as critical as today. Never. Again, 1967, I was there. The War of Kippur, I reported about it. I was there in 1991 when Saddam Hussein did send some Scuds on Israel, and when, by the way, Israel was asked, demanded, and obliged not to reply and not to retaliate. I remember a conversation which I had at that time with Itzhak Shamir, and it was quite similar to the situation of today. I was embedded with a special unit of Tzal, IDF, a Golani unit, during the war of 2006. I made a story for the New York Times Magazine and Le Monde at that time. So I know this situation. It has never been as critical as today. Today, Israel is besieged by all sides, by Hezbollah north, by the Houthis south, by the Iraqi pro-Iranian militias on the west. The only place which seems to be safe is the sea, except that I learned today that there is a flotilla of boats having the intention to break the blockade of the Gaza Strip, sent by Turkey, or who embarked, who began the trip from Turkey, with a sort of agreement of the Turkish government. So this situation of being besieged by all sides, this situation of all these forces used, marionetized by Iran, which is a great power. Iran is not just another country. It's an imperial country with an imperialist will, and it is making all those forces, and first of all, of course, Hamas, as its marionettes. This situation is more hard, more tough, more dangerous, and more existential than it has ever been for Israel. And for the first time, really, I'm afraid for Israel. And I'm all the more afraid because when the West sees what we are describing now, Israel besieged by all sides, Hezbollah, Hamas, and so on, we could expect a support, a solidarity. We could expect to see the public opinions understanding that whatever critique they can have against the government of Israel, at the end of the day, it is a democracy besieged by theocratic, authoritarian, fascist movement. And we could expect that the public opinion, the youth in the universities, in the campuses, takes side for democracy, therefore for Israel. And I never saw, again in my life, in the campuses, in the public opinion in general, so much critique, so much demonization, so much Nazification of Israel as today. It has never been probably the partition between good and bad has never been so crystal clear than today. So crystal clear. Iran is real Iran. The regime of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is really a fascist country which treats the women the way we know, where if you put your rouge à lèvres, your lip stick in a bad way, you can be shot dead. The gays are treated like subhumans, and so on. So it's so crystal clear. And we see a public opinion really taking side, in the best case, by putting an equivalence between Hamas and Israel, Hezbollah and Israel, Iran and Israel, in the best case. and in the worst case, taking side for the bad side. So this, for me, is a real concern. And when I look at what is happening, I was in the plane all day, I just arrived, but nevertheless, I had the news. When I see the debate about the retaliation or not of Israel, I don't know, people seem to look at this crisis between Iran and Israel as a soccer match. 1 point for Israel, 1 point for Iran. Okay, they stopped the ball. Game over. Come on, they stopped the ball. What about the next ball? As I said, next ball will be with nuclear devices. So I'm really concerned about the situation, and I don't want to be dramatic, but I tell you the truth.
I know you are a deep reader, and you personally knew Malraux over the years. And it was in 1949 that he said Western civilization has begun to doubt its own credentials. And now it's not doubt, it's abandonment of those principles when we see on college campuses gay alliances rooting for Hamas that likes to throw them off of buildings, and feminists standing up for these rapists. Could you talk a little bit about the cultural crisis that we're in?
Yes, again, I am a liberal myself. I did fight all my life for liberal values. I think that in my country, in France, I published what is probably the modern manifesto of feminism, a book by a great French lawyer called Gisèle Halimi. This book was published in 1973 or 4, which was called La cause des femmes, the cause of the combat, the cause of the women. So this is my world. These are my values. And I must say that I am, again, not even surprised, mesmerized, flabbergasted when I see feminists of today who support women except when they are Israelis, who condemn, who think rightly that rape is one of the worst crimes which can be committed against a human being, except when the raped woman is Israeli. When I see the feminist movements in America, and some of the feminist movements, but maybe most of them in America and in France, saying, and against, they are right, that the word of a woman who has been abused has to be listened first with respect, with decency, with a sort of preconception of truth, if I dare say, except if she's a Jew. When she's a Jew, then you have some feminists today who say, wait a minute, we have to check, we have to confront with the possible guilty, maybe we did not investigate enough, and so on and so on. And this is true for some of the feminist groups. This is true in the UN, in the commission devoted in principle to the women's rights, who it took them 4 months before condemning the horrible rapes committed in Kfar Aza and in Be'eri. It took them 4 months. And when they decided to investigate, it took them again 2 more months. And when they published their report 2 weeks ago, it was full of reserves It was full of understatements. It was full of doubts. It was full of embarrassment. I never saw that in the actual time. So we have some left progressive groups who believe that a raped woman has to be listened to without waiting anything, except when this woman has been not only raped, but killed at the same time. Not only killed, but before being killed, really cut into pieces during the rape by a third man. And that in this case, she does not deserve the same respect. Her fate is not enough. These groups regret that we cannot have the full testimony. Of course, she's dead. And so on. So there is a sort of a real two sides, un deux poids et deux mesures. How do you say that? A double standard. A double standard. Now, in big parts of my family, who are the liberals, at the expense of the Jews. It is true for the women, but not only. In the campuses of America, in Harvard, in MIT, in UPenn, every minority have the right to be respected, have the right to have some safe spaces. That's fine. But every minority except the Jewish one. The Jewish minority, they have the right to offend them, to harass them, to take their kippah out, and so on. And when you ask, when the Congress asks the presidents of this university if this double standard against the Jewish students is or not an offense to the regulation of their universities, they reply, it depends on the context. Yes, it can be an offense, but it depends what the Jewish student said before. It depends if he's a Zionist or not, and so on. So there is on the left, in the woke ideological neighborhood, there is a climate of systemic structural offense to the Jews, which is an insult to the Jews, of course, which is an offense to humanity, of course, and which is an offense also to the liberal tradition. Yes. Those liberals are really offending, betraying the tradition which they pretend to embody.
In your book, which I thought was so magnificent, the English title, Left in Dark Times, you've shown the light on left-wing anti-Semites who hide themselves behind the veneer of anti-racism, and that we're now in a situation in which progressives are often our worst enemies. We have to worry about the right, which, of course, in this town 2 years ago distributed some horrifying literature, but most of what we're seeing is what David Bernstein calls woke anti-Semitism. Could you explore a little bit more deeply what's gone wrong, that liberalism is often so illiberal, and what's the way forward?
What happens to liberalism? What happens is that liberalism is a turning its back to liberal values, to humanistic values, to universalism. Liberalism, once upon a time, was preaching internationalism, brotherhood and sisterhood of every women and men, whatever their faith and whatever their background and so on. And now liberalism has become a system which makes some jails, some gated communities for each minority. Today, those whom you are mentioning consider to be a liberal, being a liberal, consider it to build really some gated communities for those who have this sexual orientation, those who have this ideological tendency, and so on. And when you consider the world as an addition of gated communities, it is the open way to war of all against all. It is the open gate to the stigmatization of everyone. It is the open gate not to the eradication of racism, but to the exasperation of racism, and so on. And about Israel, of course, they don't understand anything. If a real progressist, a real liberal, a true liberal, should understood, for example, that Israel is not only the only democracy in the Middle East, but one of the most well-achieved democracy in the world. Really, the balance of powers, the relationship to minorities is an example. It is not the only one. You have a few great democracies, America, France, but Israel is really in the top 5, maybe, of the real democracy. If you consider the way of treating, of integrating a minority, we in France have big troubles with our minorities. You in America had big troubles in the past, and maybe again, with some of the American minorities. In Israel, you have a minority, the Arab minority, inside Israel, 20% of the population, with sometimes some of them having real critiques about and against the founding ideology of their country, which is Zionism. Nevertheless, of course, they have every civic, political, economic right which is possible. There is they are 100% Israelis. They have, there are judges, ministers, MPs in the Knesset in a proportion, in a degree, which really could put shame on many democracies, including France and maybe America, and so on. If you consider to be a liberal, liberalism has a certain conception of war and peace. Again, Israel is exemplary. To be a liberal means to love the peace and to hate the war at the end of the day also. Israel is in a state of war since the first day of its existence, and nevertheless, it never gets accustomed to war. And nevertheless, Israel never accepted the state of exception, which is always related to war. In France, when we had a war in Algeria, after a few years, we accepted a lot of anti-liberal laws, even torture, censorship on press, and so on. In America, when you had the massacre of September 11, it took America not even a few months, a few weeks to have Patriot Act 1 and then Patriot Act 2. And again, some limitations, some laws who took some liberties with liberty. In Israel, war is lasting since 75 years, and democracy holds on, and democracy stands firm. And there was never this this way to get accustomed to the state of war. And this again is a liberal miracle. And this again is a democratic achievement. And this again is a proof of the rare vibrancy of Israel democracy. So, a liberal in America, in Europe, should not only endorse, but should love Israel in the very name of the values which he, the liberal, is supposed to embrace and to love. It's not the case, but this is not a problem of Israel, it's the problem of liberalism, which is really, as we say in French, walking on the head and not on the feet.
I want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time on Ukraine, where you went to the very front lines, at times under fire. And let me ask that same kind of question. What would be your message to our very divided Congress that's been so hesitant about sending aid to Ukraine?
A message to the same
Congress.
Blinken and the president?
This time to Congress.
To the Congress. To the Congress, I already delivered the message. I was in the Congress on January 10, I think, January 10, and I presented to them, I had the great privilege and honor to present to the Congress of your country, of America, my last movie, my last documentary, called Heroiam Slava, Glory to the Heroes. So I presented the movie to the Congress. It was a full house. And of course, I introduced it and I concluded it. And I delivered a very simple message I can only repeat here. What I said is that it is not only a matter of values, but it is a matter of national interest for America to support Ukraine and to oppose Putin. I would say, and I said, that if we let Putin win this war, nobody will prevent Xi Jinping from launching an assault on Taiwan. Nobody will prevent Erdogan in Turkey to violate all the rules of his alliances, NATO, and so on, to attack tomorrow a piece of Greece, some islands, and so on. So I would say that it is the national interest of America, it is the existential interest of the West in general to reply to the will for war of Putin by a strong resistance. But same for Hamas and for Israel. It is the same fight, the fight of Israel against Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. And the fight of Ukraine against Russia and Iran also, and North Korea. We know that Putin sells his oil to Iran and gets his bullet from Kim Jong-un. So Israel and Ukraine are the two hot spots of our front line. Our national defense, our national security for Europe, maybe more, but for America also, is at stake in these two places, in Israel and in Ukraine. Both are front line. And when we send weapons, we Americans, we French, and I say we in the two cases, America is my fatherland of heart. So I dare to say we. Also, when we send weapons to Israel and to Ukraine, we are not making gifts. We are not making charity. We are displacing our stocks of weapons from places where, for God's sake, they are not useful at that moment, to places where they are really needed for us. So that's what I said to Congress. At that time, January 10, the question was to vote or not a package of aid of 61 billions to both Israel and Ukraine. As far as I know, 3 months later, we are at the same point. I would be glad through, this assembly to readdress, to make a readdress of the same message to the Congress. We are at the same point. There is emergency to help those two sister democracies, which are Ukraine and Israel, facing the same enemy, Iran and Russia. By the way, Russia, who is also endorsing Hamas, as you certainly know. We have proofs, it is documented everywhere, not by secret services. In the serious press, we know that the Hamas leadership, was received in Moscow with honors, red carpet, before October 7 and after October 7 for congratulations. They were received. We know that Putin, a few weeks ago, said that Kremlin was studying new ways of implementing and reinforcing the link with Hamas. We know, I had the privilege, if I dare say, the dark privilege, to discuss once, a few years ago, with a man called Alexander Dugin. D-U-G-I-N. I don't know if the name rings a bell or not, but just to make it short, Alexander Dugin is one of the chief ideologists, chief intellectuals of Putin, of the Kremlin. He is one of those who inspire the policy of the Kremlin today. He is not the only one. His influence should not be maybe overestimated, but he is considered as one of really those who feed the beast of ideas of Kremlin. And I had a public discussion with him. It is available online. You can find it on my, everywhere. You type my name and the name of Dugin, you will find it. And he said a very interesting thing, but not as a slip of the tongue. He made it as an argument. Mr. Dugin said that the vision of Russia today, this was 2018, so 6 years ago, before the war in Ukraine and before the attack of Hamas against Israel. He said that there was an unbreakable link and a necessary alliance, a bond of life between Islamism and Russian Orthodoxy. He said that against European values, against the spirit of enlightenment, against the virus of Jewry, because he's an anti-Semitic, this Mr. Dugin, there was a necessity to make the bond between Russia and radical Islam. And this is how he justified, by the way, the role which Russia is playing in Syria, for example, the help provided to Bashar al-Assad, and so on and so on. So we are facing a global game where things are more simple than it seems. Between Hamas and Russia, there is there is an alliance, a brotherhood, and common values. If you consider Putin not just as another dictator, but a dictator who has a real ideology, who has a real creed, and this is the case, Putin has a creed. In his creed, there is this idea that against America, against Europe, against Jews, against what Dugin calls thalassocracy, the power, the liquid power of the Atlantic countries. You know, there is a need of a strong commitment together of radical Islamist countries and Russia. That is a fact. Find this video. It's easy to find, and you will see that. So this is the game in which we have to move, to act, to resist, and hopefully to win.
Monsieur Lévy, as we predicted, we have material here for several hours, and there are many more questions I'd like to ask you about your insights into fascism, and want to advise everyone to read your book, Empire and the Five Kings, to see the way that America has backed off from global leadership at a crucial time. But we did promise the audience the opportunity to ask questions, and I will reiterate Paul Levy's admonition: no speeches, just questions.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Lévy, and that was amazing. We all agree on that. I read The Empire and the Five Kings, courtesy of Michael, and that was written in 2019. I would love to know, at that time you wrote about Obama, you wrote about Trump, you wrote about China. I would love to know what, if anything, you have changed your mind about in these past 5 years. A lot has happened, and I wonder if you stand by your feeling on the ascendancy of China and the American presidency. If you could just elaborate on what might be different in the last 5 years.
Madam, my reply will be very short. I have, alas, nothing to add to what I said at that time in 2018. Situation is just the same. If you look at the war launched by Iran, by Hamas, the invasion of Israel by Hamas, because it was an invasion, it was not just a terrorist attack. And Hamas is not just another terrorist group. It is a terrorist group plus an army organized with battalions and invading Israel. Thousands of invaders entered in Israel to kill, to rape, and to invade. Okay? If you look at that, Hamas was immediately supported by the five, which I identified in the book you mentioned, The Empire and the Five Kings, supported by Iran, of course. Iran was really maneuvering the Hamas, supported by Russia. I just told you how they were probably even involved or at least aware before of what was cooking and boiling in meetings in Beirut and so on. I mentioned that in my coming book. Turkey, Erdogan, though member of NATO, though blah, 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 on the 7th at night, he had a huge meeting at the Atatürk airport with the Palestinian scarf and saying very strongly that the Hamas was not a terrorist group, but a resistance movement working for the liberation of a people. So, Iran, Russia, Turkey. Then you had all the countries who are nostalgic of the Sunni Caliphate. Afghanistan under the Taliban's. Qatar, who is, as you know, hosting till today the leadership of Hamas and hosting without apparently thinking of putting them under arrest or without apparently even thinking of interrogating them. You know, there is a police which is called Interpol for much less than what was done by Hamas. You have a red notice of Interpol. No, the chiefs of Hamas, they are in Qatar, free, celebrated, considered as honest brokers of a possible diplomatic solution between the rapists, killers of Hamas, and the Israelis, and so on. And fifth, China. China, who, number one, did not condemn the pogrom of October 7. Number two, refused till this moment to condemn Hamas as a terrorist organization. And China, who orchestrated an anti-Semitic campaign, very strange in China, which never happened in the history which I know. I'm an observer, and I was even sympathetic to China a long time ago. I never saw that. Anti-Semitism does not belong to the cultural tradition of China, except now. To celebrate the pogrom, to escort the Hamas, to express the necessary solidarity with the liberation movement which the Hamas is, they really orchestrated everywhere, in the press of the regime, on the social networks of China, a new, completely odd anti-Semitic campaign. So you have the five. And I would love to say that I was mistaken at that time. I was not. My analysis of this book, alas, proves to be true again now with this tragedy, which is the terrorist attack of Hamas and of Iran against Israel. It proves to be more true than ever, alas.
I come from Morocco, and I know very well the mentality of the Islamic. I must say Americans are very naive about those people. They don't. They're very kind people, and they're naive. And I'm not speaking about all Arabs, only Islamic. Now, is Israel going to attack Iran because those people only respect strength? They only know about strength, not weakness. Is Israel going to attack Iran?
Of course, Israel should retaliate. Not only because this part of the world only respects force, but because there is no other solution. If America was attacked tomorrow by Mexico with hundreds of drones and missiles thrown to the air, saturating the air defense of America, if there was the threat that next time it will be a nuclear attack, it's the duty of a country and of a regime to react, to punch the attacker. It's just a duty. About Islam, I'm not sure if I agree completely with you, but maybe I did not understand you well. But what I believe deeply is that there is a war, an ideological war going on inside the Muslim world. An ideological war, a conflict strong inside the Islamic world between those who support Hamas, who love theocracy, who are friends with killing, the idea of killing Jews, Westerners, and the Democrats. I have been friend in my life with a lot of Muslim people who were on the side of the West, on the side of Israel, and on the side of Enlightenment values. For example, Bosnia, Sarajevo, in former Yugoslavia. In Bosnia, you had Muslim people, real Muslims, pious Muslims, who were free people, lovers of democracy, faithful to the best of the Enlightenment civilization. The Kurds, the Kurdish people, in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, and in Turkey. Again, they are Muslims, but they are the best of the cream of the cream of the democratic world. They are pro-American. They are pro-Israel. They pray. I have some Kurdish friends with whom I have now, at this moment, these days, a link. They pray every night for the victory of Israel against Hamas. So they are Muslim, the Kurds, the Bosnians, the women in Iran, the women who write some graffitis on the walls of Tehran at night, mocking the Ayatollahs, laughing at them, telling them that they have no balls, no guts, that they are a tiger of paper. These ladies, they are Muslims, but they are on the side of gender equality, of values of freedom, and so on. So this is the reality. You have inside the Muslim world, you have a real dividing line between these two civilizations, civilization of dictatorship, civilization of freedom. And our duty, we, Americans and French, is to extend our hand, to give as much help as we can to those who support democracy. Exactly as we did, by the way, when I was young, with the dissidents of the Soviet Union or of the Soviet Empire. What did we do at that time? All time. But we created a chain, we, and especially America, a chain of solidarity, aiming those dissidents, those freedom fighters in Moscow, in Poland, and so on and so on. And finally they won. I was there. Everyone believed that they were a tiny minority, that it was just a moral duty to support them, but that they would never prevail, that they were the salt of the earth, but that it was a sort of baroud d'honneur, that we are fighting for them just for honor. No, they won. in reality. Maybe the situation is the same in the Muslim world. Maybe if we really support the free women in Iran, if we really support the Kurds in Iraq and in Syria, if we really support a country like Morocco, again, who is friendly to Jews, who has a great tradition of fraternity and brotherhood with the West, if we really create toward them also the same sort of chain of solidarity, they will prevail and they will defeat radical Islamism.
Thank you, Mr. Lévy. I have a question. As you are a freedom fighter and a humanist, what would you say or suggest to the members of the American Jewish community that are thinking about electing a candidate that sabotaged before our democracy, and how critical is this coming election to the fate of the world and the fate of Israel, from your point of view?
First of all, in democracy, this is one of the virtues of democracy. You don't have in a democratic country bad and good. It's always bad and less bad and so on and so on. So, of course. And I would advise to Jews in America, like in France, as Jewry, to keep as much as they can with their bipartisan bias. I don't think it is in the interest of, if I understood well, of the Jewish world as itself, the Jewry in its constituency, to take side too strongly, number one. Number two, if I were American, I would say in the next weeks, next month, what I wrote in the New York Times 8 years ago, 7 years ago, when there was the first election, when America was preparing itself for the first election of the candidate Trump. I addressed to my personal message to the Jews of America, and I told them to be careful about false friendship. I said in this piece in the New York Times, you can again find it online, that for a Jew, friendship has to be based on real understanding, real knowledge of the other. It is not just an electoral calculation. It is not just calculation of opportunity. There was a famous debate between Hannah Arendt and Gershom Scholem about the Ahavat Israel. Ahavat Israel, the love of Israel, the real love of the Jewish people, which is based on knowledge of the values, of the beliefs, of the creed of the Jews. It is not just a decision, you know. Same in France. We have an extreme right in France, Marine Le Pen, who decided a few weeks ago, she decided by decree that she became a friend with Jews. Alas, to become friend with Jews, to turn one's back to an old tradition of anti-Semitism, it is not just like this. It supposes a real work of the mind, a real work of the spirit. It is not a decision of a political bureau, you know. It doesn't work this way. And I think it is the same in America. And false friends, friendship based on false values can be sometimes more dangerous than frank opposition. We have to be very careful to that. False friendship.
I think we have time for two more questions. I think we have to invite Monsieur Lévy back soon to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Oh. Not too long ago, the administration put forth a $110 billion proposal for aid to Ukraine, Israel, and humanitarian aid for Gaza. Reports are that this would have tremendous support in Congress, but for reasons that many of us know, it's not coming to a vote in the House, which seems to be so frustrating, whereas you said these are black and white issues, Ukraine, Israel, humanitarian reason.
Question.
So the question is, how do we get past an impasse like this?
How we can pass that? By forgetting the political quarrels, by forgetting the petty partisan quarrels of which too many congressmen in America and in France are hostages. And by not mixing everything together. Ukraine and Israel is one thing. The humanitarian aid to Gaza is a very different thing and very complicated. The question in Gaza is not to drive humanitarian aid, is to know how to do it. Humanitarian aid goes through, and without the requirement of America or the lessons of France. Israel brings humanitarian aid every day to Gaza. We have every morning 400 to 500 trucks of humanitarian aid, of food aid, going through the checkpoints, 4 checkpoints between Israel and Gaza. The real point is not that. The food is going, but the real point is how it is delivered. How can it be not hijacked by Hamas? How can it be not robbed and sold on high price in markets and so on? And how to do without the organization which is supposed to deliver the aid, which is the UN organization UNRWA, which was committed, which was involved with the crime of October 7 to an horrible extent. We know now that the organization committed to deliver the aid had among its members dozens of people who were part of the crime, and hundreds who celebrated the crime, the pogrom, dozens participating in the pogrom, and hundreds celebrating it by Twitter and so on. So this is the point, not to pass a bill. The problem is to help Israel and to help the Arab countries involved in the question in the area to organize this humanitarian help. And by the way, I saw in my life many wars. I documented many wars in my life. It is the first time in my life where I see an actor of a war, Israel, taking so much care, thinking so much, trying so hard to find solutions about humanitarian aid. And believe me, I was in Afghanistan in 2001, 2002, when we American, French, and Westerners and and Westerners together, when we attacked bin Laden in Afghanistan. The war of October, November 2001 after September 11. No one thought about humanitarian aid. It was out of scope, out of frame. It was not a point at all. I was there. I was the special envoy of my president, Jacques Chirac, at that time. I was in Kabul. Not for humanitarian aid. Nobody cared. Nobody gave... well, I was in Mosul. I was in Mosul from November 2015 to January 2016, 15 to 16. I was in Mosul when, again, Arab countries, with the support of American Air Force and of French Air Force, liberated Mosul from the Islamist people of ISIS, okay? We bombed the city. We destroyed a jewel of humanity, which was the old Nineveh city, Mosul, which was the city of Jonas. There was a lot of huge humanitarian crisis. Nobody thought about conveying humanitarian aid. The Iraq, which was maneuvering, it was not a question. France, it was not a question. I was there, I made a film at that time, and America too. So Israel, for the first time in those sort of wars of liberation of a country against Islamic iron rule, for the first time, we have Israel fighting Hamas and taking care, making it a point of principle to deliver alimentary food aid. It is the first time. Consider that we had step 1, Al-Qaeda, step 2, ISIS, step 3, Hamas. It is the 3 sequences of the same story. It is at the stage 3 with Hamas and with Israel maneuvering that for the first time the humanitarian aid problems become a huge issue for the honor of Israel.
Monsieur Lévy, you have spoken to all of us from the depths of experience, depths of wisdom, and depths of heart. Thank you so much for being with us.